Sorry for the delay. We are so much privileged to have Professor ABK Kasozi with us today. Professor Kasozi is one of our legendary scholars whom we are proud of, especially in the discipline of history. He is a former member of the Department of History here at Makerere University. He taught in the Department of History from 1973 to 1983. I don't know how many of us were in existence at that time, but I know that many of us were not, were not yet there. So, Professor Kasozi is also a former research fellow at the Makerere Institute of Social Research. And recently, he authored one of the very, very informative books on the biography of ABK Kasozi, which is a must read for anybody interested in the history of Uganda. Today, Professor Kasozi will be talking to us on the theme, what is the way forward for Makerere in the next 100 years? So, ladies and gentlemen, allow me at this very moment to invite Professor Kasozi to take us through the presentation, and then we shall have the discussants who are also here with us in the smart room. Dr. Charlotte and Dr. Yahaya are already here with us. So after the presenter has finished his presentation, then we shall get to the discussants and then to the broader audience. Professor, you are highly welcome.
Yeah. And young historians. Some of us are called historicals. So I'm really pleased that we have very many young who would be historians. I think what I want to stress in this paper is that history is not only the study of the past. History is the study of the past in order to reflect on what should be happening and what would happen next time, the following years. So this paper comes to you and to me for this idea of what Makerere will be in the 100 years as a contribution to the understanding of the management of institutions of higher education. And when we started the National Council for Higher Education, I was actually the founder of the National Council for Higher Education. The question was to ask ourselves, what is a university? And we didn't resolve that issue up to now. But what I would like to say is that a university, like any other social institution, is not static. It changes. And Makerere right now is esteemed in the minds of very many people that it's prestigious, it's been around for a long time. But people should not forget that what determines an institution is quality, is how it is managed. And that the management model we put in place actually determines the quality of the institution. Makerere has gone through a number of management models, right? And those of you who have read my paper might look at that. And so right now, Makerere is perceived to be on a higher end of the university systems, possibly looking at the rankings, the global rankings of universities, which actually don't use local measures to measure these universities. So what would Makerere be in the next 100 years? If we want to keep it as the model university, how should it look like? So if we go back, universities were started in the past as a clarification to have institutions to clarify, to add, and to instill the values and ideals of the ruling classes. And many of these ideals were really religious because many countries in the Middle East, where the oldest university stands, Al-Azhar, and later on in Europe, were religious ideals of the people who ruled these institutions. Now, these are the views were protected in the universities. And the way to protect these views by the universities was to have an agreement with the state to give the university the freedom to teach. It was understood that a university institution was managed according to the way the state was managed. And this is the problem with the university institution, is that it's very difficult for universities to manage themselves in a way the state doesn't want it to be managed. As I said, Makerere has gone through a number of management models since 1922. First, it was a colonial university linked to metropolitan universities in Europe. And then from 1950, when the British realized that they were going out, they made it a development university in the sense that it was not only to produce civil servants who would support the colonial structure, but also highly skilled individuals who would staff the colony that they were going to leave behind. Okay, this one is not. Okay, it's difficult. My hand is very weak. But no, I'll try. I'll try. So then it became a government institution when we became independent. So the experience of the past years is that Makerere became most famous when it was free from government control. These are the years 1950 to around 1970, when Makerere had complete control of its affairs. And this was not an accident, but it was a struggle between the university and the colonial governors, one of which was the government of Tanzania, the colonial governor, wanted to dictate on who would speak on the campus, and said that Nyerere and Mboya should not speak on campus. So, but the vice chancellor at the time, or the principal, insisted that they come and speak, and that the university must decide who can speak, and therefore must decide who can teach, and must decide what can be taught. Earlier on, one principal called Lamont had resigned because the governor of Kenya insisted, and the governor of Uganda agreed, that one person called Mary Parker, who was anti-colonial, she hated the anti-colonial policies of Kenya, be dismissed. Dr. Lamont said, if you dismiss her, I am resigning. So they forced him to resign, to dismiss, and so he resigned. So it was a well-fought freedom of speech they had. Now, between 1950 and 1970, you had all these publishers, you had a lot of productions in the arts department. People like Ngugi wa Thiong'o, uh, Nazareth, and so many of these publishers. And also at the medical school, you had people like Karim breaking the new ground in medical service in Africa. So the university was mostly free at that time. However, between in 1970, the then president of Uganda, Obote, introduced the Makerere Act. And this act actually tied the hands of Makerere. So Makerere was not able to select its administrators and lecturers. Professors were actually selected on the radio. And almost all officers were chosen. And obviously the money was controlled by the state. So that the university was completely enslaved. Now, then comes the year 2001 when a new act was put in place. Now, this new act improved on the administration of on the freedom. However, the new act further made problems for this institution because the government retained virtually everything on the finances. So the university institution's governance and management is conditioned by the financing model. And from 1970 to the present, the finance model of this university has been constraining the freedom of the university. So what my paper is suggesting that looking at the history of Makerere and looking at the history of universities, the more a university is constrained by the state, the less academic output will be put out. This is not to say that the government, particularly now, this government, have not helped the university. No, but the university is controlled by the financing model that they have. Now, this finance model has, I think I've listed 9 major ropes around its neck. First, Section 6A gives the Minister of Education power to decide the policies of universities when there is need. 2, the university's primary funding is the state. So when the state is poor, the university is poor. In the past, there was a university fund in which all donors poured money, and the university was but one of them. But during 1971 to I think 2001, when the state had financial constraints, the university had constraints. The fourth rope is that the university cannot set its own fees. So the fees students pay are just 40% of of the unit cost for educating a student or producing a research product. So it becomes very difficult for the university, even if you do what Makerere did in the last 15 years, to admit as many students as possible. You cannot get your money out because you are losing money. You're losing 60% of what you put out. So that's why Makerere has such a huge debt and deficit. I don't know whether they paid it, but when they report, the committee was here, the debt the university was in was terribly astronomical. And they list the amount of debt they have. Fifth, Section 59 of public universities can only invest with the approval of the government. 6, the university the government can request and use the money back from the government. As from the university. If the university collects the money, then according to Section 44, subsection C of the Public Finance and Accountability Regulations, the government is free to take money that is not used. 7th, university employees must retire at a certain age. I don't know whether they have reduced it from 60. What was it in the past? When Renee reporter visited here, it was still 60. I don't know whether it is still 60. But you see, unlike civil servants, professors and academics are paid for the products they put out. They are not employed because of the lists and vacancies. And so once you put that, many people will run away and go to other universities. And the government keeps crying, brain drain. Universities should not be subjected to civil servant capacity. So academics should not be employed like that. 8th, now, money given to the university legally is government money and it should be reported. However, this government has been very kind that Makerere has been able to use its money without being snatched by government. But legally, they can do it. If the government is in financial problem and your account is very good, they can actually take that money. But so far, this has not happened. And lastly, there is the PPDA rules. These really don't apply to universities. I know that they were brought to check corruption, which they have not done in government, but in universities, they are terribly inconvenient in the use. So you have a funding model that is used to manage public universities. And this funding model factors the way the university is managed. And therefore, as it turns out, the university is managed like any other government institution, which must obey all bureaucratic rules and red tape. So the university is a government institution, yes, but it's more than a government institution. It is a parastatal body. And therefore, it becomes very difficult for originality to emerge from individual actors within the university when the university is that much controlled. So the phases I mentioned that the university has gone through during the colonial period, yes, the university was controlled by the colonial period, by the colonial masters, but they permitted a lot of flexibility. And when you look at Makerere between 1922 and 1934, you'll find a lot of buildings put here by individuals, botany club, various groups giving the university or the college at that time, College of Higher Education, donations. And these donations were sometimes exempt tax. And so they were free. And therefore, the vice chancellor or the principal at the time had the flexibility. And so the management model at the time was, yes, a parastatal body or a government institution, but it was at that time freer. So what do you do to free the university so that the university is freer? Now, before I go there, I would like to quote something that happens in the book that you've said, that a university is like a beehive. And the farmer normally structures the look and the way a beehive is made. And he puts it in the garden or somewhere for the bees to make honey. But what the farmer can't do is to go into the hive and tell the bees how to manufacture bees or how to pollinate plants. The bees do it for themselves. And academics are like that. They must be left alone to manufacture honey, to pollinate plants. However, the beehive must know that the state is overall, and therefore the state is the overall, the overall distant owner. He could actually obliterate the whole hive and take it away. So, so you see, the two are symbiotic because the state needs the beehive. The farmer needs the beehive because without the bees, your coffee trees and other plants will not be pollinated. Now, if you also want honey, you will not get honey. People forget, farmers, that for each farm of more than 1 acre, you need a beehive in order to pollinate your beehive. But the bees in there must be left alone to do their work. So currently, for many of us who want Makerere to retain its glory that we had in the 50s, I am not so sure we have it now. I mean, as the director of the National Council of Higher Education, I know the weaknesses, and I put some of them here. For example, I don't believe in the college system. I think we should go back to the departments because I think we don't see no value. And I did argue with the Bariamreva, trying to stop him to introduce colleges in this university, but he didn't. But anyway, that's off the point. So what should we do to improve the management of this university? I think it's a twin approach. First, we have to reform the way the university is funded. Once we reform that, then that should change the management of the institution. So from 1970 to currently, the state has been the main factor supplying the university with the money, and that money depends on how much the government had depended on the budgetary constraints. And that has been catastrophic in the sense that the university has not had sufficient money, and they have sought in admitting as many students as possible. that can't make because you only balloon, can't help. You only balloon the date. So this is, if you look at this, can you see this figure, right? This figure has four major columns. The first column, pardon? The first column is the funding source. Where does the money come from, right? And that's very important. But because we don't want to send the money directly to the university, and now we have more than one public university, you have a university's grants committee. And then you have Uganda Students' Loan and National Research Foundation. All these intermediary bodies are supposed to work in the public good, for the public good. And all these then fund the various components of the university and the research. And obviously, a university is more than a teaching institution. The role of a university is really to generate knowledge, to store knowledge, and to disseminate this knowledge to learners. The learners include students and staff. Even me with the gray hair, I'm still learning. And so, but the most important part, or the equally important part, is the accountability mechanism. And the Auditor General should always have the ability to audit any institution that manages public funds, whether collected by government or private institutions. But here, I think the private institutions don't. And then the National Council for Higher Education for academic equality and processes. Now, as you saw here in this paper, or as you read the paper, much as I am the founding director of the Executive Council, I still believe that universities should be left as far free as possible to determine on what they teach, on what they research on, and who they employ. And that the National Council for Higher Education should only jump in when there is outright diversion from the main, what is expected, which is not normally the case. So once we have a model like that, then the management, the university cannot longer be directed by the state as Section 60A of the Act gives the minister all the power to direct the university. So to me, the way forward for Makerere is a free institution that is accountable to the public through all these institutions, but at the same time, free from government, administrative, and management red tape. In short, the university should be turned from a parastatal body to a public chartered university. In the past, most of the universities, as I said, were chartered by the state, both for protection, but also for making sure that they did not do what the state didn't wish them to do. So I think people want Makerere to remain what it has been, particularly what it was in the 50s and 60s, should think very seriously, what type of institution should we strain for? Now, I'm not saying I want you to rebel and tell the government that I've said that the way you are managing the university is wrong. No, I think they've tried their best. Definitely the situation now is better than it was in the 70s. And when I was here, you were more free than when I was here. I do remember we were sitting in the main hall, and the vice chancellor at the time was Professor Lutwama. And he welcomed the president, Mr. Idi Amin. And the president came without talking, climbed up. He said, I am not a man of many words. I'm not going to speak a lot, but I want to say this. I see in the audience there is Mr. Senteza Kajubi, and here Professor Lutwama. Professor Lutwama, go down and sit where Kajubi is sitting. Kajubi, come here, you are the vice chancellor. That happened. And I saw it with my own eyes. And Professor Lutwama, I saw his pants shaking. And I said, I don't want to be in this position. But Kajubi was brave. One day I do remember on a graduation, we graduated people from School of Statistics. You know, what is that school which teaches statistics? School of Statistics. Right, statistics. So Amin asks you, Professor Kajubi, what do these people do? Kajubi didn't even waste the time. He said, you know, next year we have a census. Those are the people who count. They are so good at count that some of them have counted hairs on the people's heads. He laughed and became very happy. He had understood what the people who do statistics and apply the economics do. But Amin was there as the control of the university. He was. And the university was his. And he could really kick out the body he wanted without involving the people who teach. And so what Kenya and Tanzania did, and I participated in Tanzanian thing 2005, was to charter public universities. In Tanzania, universities are chartered, and they know they are not part of the government, but they are part, you know, they are not part of the government. They are not in the government, but they are part of the government. The government is always strong. And so the way forward for Makerere, I think, is to stop being a parastatal body and to go in the next 100 years as a publicly owned independent university, but owned by the government, but detached from the government in the way it is managed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor, for that fascinating presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me at this very moment to invite our discussants, and I will start with Dr. Charlotte, the head of Department of History, Archaeology, and Heritage Studies here at Makerere University. Dr. Charlotte Mafumbo, you are welcome to present your discussion.
Thank you very much, Professor Kasozi. I had the greatest pleasure engaging with this paper, and you give a very honest critique of our situation. You start off with a very strong appreciation of what Makerere was, and we can sense your pride in it and the very high hopes you still have. When I read The Great Expectations as a student of literature as well, I remembered Charles Dickens writing Great Expectations, and I was wondering, why did Professor choose that? And I went back to check. The issue was that Charles Dickens always looked at social issues and wanted to see how they can address any challenges society was facing. So your work comes in at a very, very timely moment. When you're reading it, I can see you're a bit nostalgic about what's happening. But again, you give us hope and you give us very strong recommendations on the way forward. I think reading the paper gives more depth in terms of the history of how this university was managed and organized. And I think you underscore something very critical of the way the public and the country at large views Makerere and would love to see it continue in its very high standards, irrespective of the sometimes difficult rankings that we go through. You highlight the management structure. You highlight how when the government funds the university, the whole process becomes politicized and its activities become fairly over-controlled. You advocate for our autonomy as a university and advocate for a negotiated kind of agreement which allows us to exist independently. Yes, the university can be controlled by the government, but have it just as an oversight. Freedom of the university is very, very key. The question I had for you, Professor, is do you cut the hand that feeds you? In advocating for our freedom as a university, when we are heavily dependent on government, what would that mean? I know that when you go back to Machiavelli says, if you really want to manage a state, control all the knowledge accesses. So while it may look as a model, it might be intentional to make sure that we are under a certain level of, I don't want to use the word surveillance, but lack of a better word, that everything we do is controlled. The one thing that I thought was very peculiar is the analogy you give between Makerere and Harvard and Oxford. And when I read Harvard, I just remembered what's happening now to Harvard in the US and how the president is really trying to gag it. And yes, the government gives it money, the state gives it money, it has its own wonderful endowments, and they felt that they could resist, but I think they have finally given in. And this is something that resonated well with what you're presenting about us. Perhaps one thing that the paper raises is that the government should, yes, provide the services and the resources and let it be free. But I just also wanted to let you know that in the last, I think around 2022, when we had COVID, just before we had COVID, the government has committed approximately $120 billion shillings to the university for research, which is the area that you really emphasize in this paper. The importance of research, the importance of new knowledge coming out of this research, which is the prime role of a university. And I think that while the university is being controlled, it is also being given the support it requires. The question is, where are we putting this knowledge and how are we documenting it? And this is perhaps something you may want to visit the Research Innovation Fund as you finalize the paper, because with the funding that we have had, the university beneficiaries have been able to innovate. We had a ventilator made during the COVID time, and remember how hard it was to access that. So I think that that funding does have some very strong benefit to the university. I also in the paper you do focus on how the university's strategic plans are aligned to the 2040 and the national development plans, and I think that is very, very important. In fact, in the last few weeks, we have seen a very, very heavily consultative process in its current review of the strategic plan, in which they are calling everybody to participate. They are reorganizing it to align it with the NDP4, which is the new one, and of course, the AU Agenda 2063. But what is very unique is that in this new strategic plan, there is a very heavy evidence of the need and the willingness to access resources that the university can do. And in the same vein, you do comment in the paper that while the funding models do have these challenges that you highlight, and you kind of decry the way the graduates training management is being done, I just wanted to also let you know that, and I'm not speaking in defense of the university, but I want to say that right now, the university is following some kind of engagement with stakeholders to align their interests into what we are doing. And because of that, we have a very strong research agenda that has been released, which has 5 areas that are key. Rather, in the next 5 years, we have health, agriculture, natural resource, education, cultural heritage and preservation, government, social justice, equity, economic growth, science and technology. So in a way, I think that the funding model that we are focusing on may have its challenges, but that if used well, could see this university remain in this coming 100 years. In fact, what was so interesting when I was reading, I was wondering, as an historian, some of what you are recommending has already started to trickle in. And I was wondering if you're a fly on the bird seeing what they're planning. So where are we putting the mark on 100? Because what you're proposing has already started being implemented into the next 100 years. So I think that with that, I feel the whole idea of the model, while you think it might need to be rethought, especially in the current structure, I want to be a devil's advocate, Professor, that when the government controls the resources the way it does now, I think we are seeing better accountability on our part. Because previously I didn't see us getting 120 billion for research. Now we see it. And maybe just to clarify this, is they now have a very complex digital finance management system, where if I want money for research, I actually plan ahead. I can't wake up and say I want money. We have been taught how to plan that in the next 6 months, the Department of History is going to need 20 million to carry out research. And as long as you defend it and you show the cluster where your research is, then you access that money. So I think that notwithstanding the challenges of the model, I think oversight is key when it comes to state resources. And maybe in a typical fashion, and I'll end here with the African solutions to African problems, universities have also reinvented themselves. And I think that is an area that I feel that needed to be also emphasized, because yes, you say it is okay for us to depend on donor money, and we should utilize it quite well. But what is happening now is that even the universities in themselves are forming associations that are helping them to manage some of these challenges that you are raising. We have the Association of African Universities. In fact, one of the papers that I referenced with your work was when Professor Sebufu was there, they did emphasize the importance of strengthening the university industrial links in Africa so that the products you're worried about not getting jobs is becoming, it's something they're looking into. How do we make the university be friends with these industries so that when the products come out, they already have jobs? It might not be achieved immediately, but I think they're thinking about it. And I also wanted to let you know, and I'm sure you probably know, but I like the model where African Research University Alliance is also providing some support in thinking louder around how they are managing. So this discussion that we have, that you've started, is extremely pertinent and has innumerable advantages for us to listen to. And I really thank you very much and think that the developments in the university also need to be put into consideration. I submit.
Thank you so much, my head of department, Dr. Charlotte Mafumbo, for making that independent critique. Prof, would you like to respond before we get to the next discussant? Okay, maybe before we get to Dr. Yahya, allow me take this opportunity to recognize someone in our midst who has just joined us, a globally celebrated scholar who has written extensively on the history of Buganda, particularly in the area of gender. Professor Nakanyike Musisi from the University of Toronto. Professor Nakanyike Musisi is also former director of Makerere Institute of Social Research, where Dr. Yahya Seremba hails from. Professor, you are highly welcome. Please feel at choose and feel at history. Thank you. So allow me welcome Dr. Yahya Seremba to present his.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. I thank the Department of History for keeping these seminars running and for inviting me to be part of this conversation, specifically to discuss Professor Kasozi's paper. Professor Kasozi, for those who don't know him well, is one of Uganda's outstanding scholars. Outstanding in the sense that some of the books he has written are some of the foundational texts in the study of Ugandan history and politics. And here specifically, I want to point out his book, The Spread of Islam in Uganda, published by Oxford University Press. His other book, The Social Origins of Violence in Uganda, also published by another major university press. So they are foundational in the sense that you cannot claim to be grounded in the history and the politics of Uganda if you have not read these books. So it is a great honor, Professor Kasozi, for me to discuss your paper. You continue to be an inspiration to all young scholars who want to take scholarship seriously. So I will begin by asking, what kind of problem is Professor Kasozi formulating with regard to Makerere? Is he formulating a foundational problem that calls for rethinking the very foundation of the university? Or is he formulating an operational problem that focuses on how the university should conduct its business more efficiently? I think the next 100 years is a period long enough to allow us to rethink the foundation of the university and rebuild the university if necessary, instead of focusing on how to repair it so that it functions more efficiently. So the comments I'll share will focus on rebuilding, not repairing the university. So I wish to provoke Professor Kasozi a little further to consider a more radical critique of the university, not simply a reformist one, whose ambition is limited to modifying or fixing broken things here and there, instead of rethinking the whole framework in which the university operates. So in the paper under discussion, the author is preoccupied with the relationship between the state and the university. If we may formulate this preoccupation more broadly, Professor Kasozi is interested in the relationship between power and knowledge. There are at least two ways of thinking about the relationship between power and knowledge. The first is to think of power as a distinct entity and knowledge as another distinct entity, and then approach the relationship between the two in terms of one entity interfering in the territory of the other entity. This is the sense in which Professor Kasozi's paper approaches the relationship between power and knowledge. On the one hand, there is the state as a separate entity. On the other hand, there is the university as another entity. The problem, at least according to Professor Kasozi as he formulates it, is that the state encroaches on the domain of the university. The state interferes with the business of the university, as he shows so well in the paper. And he goes ahead to propose ways in which this interference can be addressed so that the university gains the freedom to do its work. So this is a very valid understanding of the relationship between power and knowledge. And everything that the professor says and describes in regard to this interference of the state in the work of the university, we cannot deny it because we can see it quite well. But there is another way of looking at the relationship between power and knowledge. So rather than look at power as a different force that interferes in the domain of knowledge, the two, that is knowledge and power, can be approached as two inseparable sides of the same problem. In other words, there is no separate thing called power and another separate thing called knowledge. Instead, there is what Foucault refers to as power knowledge. Power knowledge. So rather than assuming that one side encroaches on the other, the two, that is power and knowledge, are seen to be co-constituting each other into one inseparable whole. So if we choose to conceptualize the relationship between power and knowledge in terms of one inseparable whole. It means we would formulate the problem differently. So, as I pointed out earlier, there is no doubt that the state interferes in the university, as the professor rightly points out. But there is something deeper. Instead of simply saying that the state interferes in the university domain, we should look for the force that constitutes both the state and the university into one problematic whole. And we should begin by asking, perhaps, what does the Ugandan state and Makerere University have in common that unites them into two sides of the same problem? Now, history shows, and you are a historian, a professor, history shows that both are post-colonial institutions. Conceptualizing the Ugandan state as a post-colonial state and Makerere as a post-colonial university would allow us to locate the problem of the relationship between the state and the university in the legacies of colonialism. So if the problem is located in the legacies of colonialism, we would need a decolonial critique of both the state and the university, including their relationship. A decolonial critique should allow us to see that the university is not simply a victim of state repression or interference. Rather, the university is part of the problem. The post-colonial state and the post-colonial university are intertwined in ways that cannot be undone by simply ensuring the administrative autonomy of the university from the state. So the professor's paper rightly tells us how a university in the abstract sense should function. He says the university, and he says so rightly, the university can't be run like an ordinary civil service institution. Teaching can't be emphasized at the expense of research. Professors can't be reduced to fundraisers. Administrators should not veto the professors. So the paper seeks to pursue these standards of the university in the abstract sense. So he looks up to Harvard, Cambridge, which is fine. But the point I wish to make here is that Makerere isn't an abstract university. Makerere, in concrete terms, is a post-colonial university that is inherently married to the post-colonial state. So this marriage between the state and the university is political and epistemic, not simply administrative, managerial, or technical. The administrative and the technical problem is a symptom of the political and the epistemic problem. So it is fine to save the university from state control. So if this is a good thing to pursue, what do we say about the centrality of the university in the nation-state building project? As we are all aware, Uganda is a nation-state for indigenous ethnic communities. We call them tribe here in colonial vocabulary. So Makerere's nation-building project is to reproduce Uganda as a nation-state for indigenous tribes. It is not surprising that students applying for admission at the university are required to state explicitly their tribes and religions. So you must have a tribe to be admitted to Makerere. So the same applies to staff. The most that colleagues, we have a colleague here called Edgar Taylor.
It's online.
Online, yes. So the most that our colleagues like Edgar Taylor, regardless of their hard work, regardless of their competence, the most they can get is a 2-year renewable contract. For no reason but because they have no tribe. They don't belong to Uganda's indigenous communities. So this is something that Makerere can't change through administrative reforms without rethinking the post-colonial Ugandan state as a political association of indigenous communities. So Kasozi's paper focuses on the problem of privileging teaching at the expense of knowledge production. What about the problem of knowledge as knowledge? The problem of knowledge itself, which, like the Ugandan state, is founded in colonial, institutional, and epistemic logics. Does the little research that is conducted at Makerere reflect theory making or simply theory application? If we look at the PhDs we are producing at Makerere. So I wish to push Professor Kasozi a little bit further, to move beyond knowledge production as such and focus on the hierarchies of knowledge production. So what about the disciplinary nationalism of Makerere, whose idea is it that knowledge has to be organized into disciplines? So if you look at our job adverts, you'll see the disciplinary rigidity that the university entertains in recruiting academic staff. That if you have to teach in political science, you must have a PhD, political science, a master's, particular field of political science, a PhD, strictly in political science, totally rigid. So the problems that the paper points out are very valid. No doubt, we can debate that. And they need urgent attention. But they are largely policy-oriented. The limitation of policy thinking is that it operates within the institutional and epistemic confines of prevailing frameworks. So in the coming 100 years, those who wish to change Makerere should move beyond policy thinking and address foundational problems associated with colonial modernity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Yahaya, for your submission. Now allow me at this moment to invite Professor Kasozi to respond to both Dr. Charlotte and Dr. Yahaya's submissions, and thereafter we shall invite the audience to engage with the professor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I too welcome Professor Nakayika Musisi, the audience. The book you mentioned on the social origins of violence, we wrote it together. And she put in a lot of work.
And
So,
again, Prof, just a moment. Allow me to recognize the Dean of the School of Liberal and Performing Arts, Dr. Pamela Kanakwa is here with us.
thank you very much. Now, it's good we waited for Yahaya's philosophical approach to the development of universities. Yes, but I think I'll answer them. I'll answer them separately because of the differences in the critique as you've heard it. Now, what I'm saying here, Charlotte, is not that the university should detach itself from the government. No. What I'm saying that government administrative behavior should not be imported into government. So the government, you say that don't cut the hands that feed you. They actually, you as you've heard, the state, yes, gives you money, but that was not my issue. I did not say that the state, the university should cut off itself from state funding. All I was saying is that the administrative regulations used to manage the state should not be the same and should not be imported into the university because they are quite different. So that's what I'm saying. And the best way to do that is to charter the university so that the government is not, the university is not administered as a government institution. I think that is what, and as you can see that chart, the main funder is always the government. But the difference with the chartered university is that in a chartered university, once the money is given, it's not given directly to the university. It goes through funding bodies, and the universities, each one of them have their own way of managing their resources. That's all. It's all how money is managed, and the accountability mechanisms are also part of that fear that they have. But what is happening, or what has happened in the past, was, and particularly during the Obote period, was that the government, the university was considered, according to Obote, a state within a state. And that's what they didn't want to. So in order to obliterate that, or to stop that, you manage the university as one of the government departments instead of letting it free to manage itself. Now, yeah, I think many of you young graduates, you know the quality of the MISA graduates we produced. I'm very, I'm very, very pleased that you are able to theoretically go into this. Now, if you read our recent book on Makerere, do read a book by Joshua Rubongoya. I mean, a chapter by Joshua Rubongoya, because actually it goes to say what it is, that the relationship between the Uganda state and Makerere are interlinked, and the other, each one of them influences the other. That you cannot think of Makerere without thinking on the Uganda state, because it is the Uganda state that really that Makerere on the one hand influences the state, and the state influences the Makerere. Now, yeah, it is very difficult. I didn't set out to write a paper on the decolonization of knowledge and the state. That one I agree, and it is very difficult anyway. Even in Tanzania, where they've at least chartered the universities, they still manage the universities as separate entities. But that would probably be the best, because what would you think of the UK without Oxford and Cambridge? Each one of them influences the other. And I think Charlotte mentioned the Harvard being attacked by Trump. The social force against Trump is too great for him. I don't know whether he will not suffer a heart attack or what, but the universities have stood up. Many of I think Harvard has gone to court and has won. They have softened. Okay. Well, I guess so that what Yahya is saying, that the two sides, the state and the university, and the relationship between the state and the university is very important. But when you look at the growth of universities, starting from maybe the Al-Azhar and those in Italy, Paris, Oxford, and all those, these universities were founded by local gentry or local states to perpetuate their ideas. They never saw themselves as builders of the state. They never saw themselves as a part of the state. They say, otherwise, they got themselves out of the state. You know, the Sufi movement, the Sufis and the monastery, the monks, move themselves out of society in order to live their own pure life. The word the Sufi means what? Pure, Safi. And so we don't have a lot of history where universities or where the knowledge and the state have been, the relationship have been, well, yeah, they have been one, I would say, but their relationship has most times been antagonistic. It has never been cordial. Even if the universities were founded by the state and the state found its universities to be reproduced in the knowledge that they make, normally the knowledge sites always faulted the state if they thought the state was wrong. And in the short term, the state wins, but in the long run, the knowledge site wins. So, but this is very important for many of you who are young and should read this chapter to see how knowledge influences the type of state that people have and what extent institutions contribute in the production of knowledge that builds the state they want. I really don't have much Yahya to reply to this. I do agree with you. And this is a problem. You find many articles written now deciding how can we Africanize the university and make it part of the state. It's not the other way around. But it's the university taking leadership to create and to form the type of states they want. So I did not, and I do confess, I did not write about that. I was a simple matter of how the university is managed. And that's what I set out to do. And I'm sure you and other people can go into that complex. We already have a chapter in that book which deals with this problem, and I didn't want to go into it. Thank you. But thank you very much for highlighting that point. And I'm sure that many of the young PhD graduates we have here will take it up that, okay, what type of university will Makerere be? At the same time saying, what type of state will Uganda be? And because that it leads to that. Yeah, it leads to that. And I'm not prepared at this particular moment to talk on politics, because it will be interpreted as a politician, particularly nowadays. But it is very important that it is very difficult for the university to be built and avoid the state, the site state. Because any institution in a country, particularly in Africa, will be managed, cannot be managed differently from the way the state is managed. And although I'm saying all this, very few rulers would want to put it in Charlotte's words, to cut the hands, to cut itself off the institutions that they have built. So universities in Africa and in many places are finding it hard to run themselves differently from the state. That's what is happening in the United States, right? Thank you very much. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much, Professor, for that response. And as we talk right now, there are many questions and comments. So I believe. And I would like to, first and foremost, if there is anybody here in house who has any question or comment, we shall be taking a few at a go. I'll be alternating between the online and the physical audience. So I'm starting with the physical audience, at least 3 questions or comments. Then I'll get the online audience like that. Thank you so much.
Professor, Thank you very much again. Always the jewel that you are. Dr. Seremba started with a felicitation about two of your books. I should also add that you wrote University Education in Uganda, and it's a wonderful book. It was seminal, the way the others are seminal, especially for us in higher education studies. I would have had many questions, but let me restrict to just two so others will also have a chance. Prof, there cannot be any doubting that the proposal you make would be the best for the university. But the truth is that we are where we are. When I thought we should be moving towards more autonomy, we handed over the collection of our school fees to Uganda Revenue Authority. There's a time I thought our council would be in charge of fixing our fees because the law allows. But you see that President Museveni comes in and stops Makerere from changing fees when they have done it through a council that is chaired by people who were sent to it by the Ministry of Education. We also know who the Minister of Education is. We cannot wish away the facts of where we are, but it is such a privilege, a blessing indeed, that you approach this from the background of being a historian and who is historical. Prof, do we have examples of universities that achieved what you propose, and how did they achieve it? Because there is no doubting that what you are proposing is the right thing, but how do we get to it? How did others, if any, achieve it in the past? And even if they achieved it, who are the guarantors of that autonomy that you propose? Because things happened that surprised us. We didn't know Colombia could be gagged. We did not know Harvard could be put under such pressure. That even if we achieve the autonomy today, who will be the guarantors when we have a new head of state or group, as you say, that is insecure and wants to control the university? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Professor, for your submission. I'm very young here in Makerere. I may not know details of the histories of the university. I'm barely 3 years. But what you are talking about is very critical. But at the same time, I'm finding it difficult to really get the gist of the exact problem and the recommendations you make to address the university being independent and at the same time being under government. It's like I am and I am not. It's difficult to, you see, operate within that. So simply, I would like to ask, in your view, what is public and public university? And what makes something publicly controlled? What are the demarcations or the yardstick that we use to say, this is public university, this is private university? Private university, it goes under these channels and it is regulated to this extent. And to what extent do we also see public universities being regulated by the government, the contribution the government makes, and how we academics or the young academics and the seniors see this dichotomy or the relationship between? Because you cannot say you want government sponsorship, government's contribution, and at the same time, you don't want it to regulate you. So in your view, what makes the university a public university, and how do we deal with the excesses of government? Thank you very much. Peter Kwame Womba.
Yes. So you want to know what makes a public university?
Thank you very much. My name is Yusuf Kasumba. I begin by adding to the long list of books that Professor Kasozi has published. I'll add only one, The Bitter Bread of Exile. I would like to echo what the previous speakers have intimated. This is a very brilliant presentation. And Professor, I have many questions, but let me focus on only two. I agree with you that funding and management are the iotas for the survival of institutions. But looking at the future, would you like to shed more light on other areas? Because universities must develop survival instincts. And Makerere has done that for the last 20 years. I remember we started with pedagogical orientation and all that has come. But how will Makerere survive if focus is only on funding and management? Did you, for example, interrogate the implications of the Mujaju report? Because universities are industries. We look at the product, and the product is knowledge, like Dr. Selemba has said. I would like to suggest that in the paper, I don't need answers now, that in the paper, you interrogate further on other survival instincts that will aid the university compete with others. You hinted on massification in terms of enrollment, and at the same time, you are advocating more enrollment at graduate level. How will Makerere do that without compromising the quality of its product? And finally, towards the conclusion, the second last paragraph makes a suggestion that I would like you to interrogate further, that the university should take leadership in general education curriculum design and management. This is a very timely recommendation, but I would like to suggest that you further interrogate the complexities related to this recommendation. While you seek to free the university from the shackles of government control, would you like other institutions to be further entangled into what the university dictates? As a curriculum developer, we have had some challenges regarding the curriculum reform at lower secondary and right now advanced level. So the suggestion that the school curriculum should aim at fulfilling university academic requirements is noble. But what are the likely implications of this in light of what we are doing at lower level? And the definite article used in this paragraph, the university, now that is Makerere. If Makerere takes the lead, what about other universities that are also in the realm of Makerere's stature? So I would like to request that you further interrogate this, because I envisage a situation where schools will be, or other institutions will be forced to follow what Makerere dictates. But the current curriculum does not look at Makerere only, or university only, as the pinnacle of knowledge acquisition. The current lower secondary curriculum is competent based, and there are many outlets that it has allowed for the products of that curriculum. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor, for this very fascinating read. And I want to just pick up from where Yusuf stopped. Yes, yes, Prof. So, yes, about this directing and managing, designing the educational curriculum. So what is happening now is that as a university, the National Council of Higher Education oversees what we promise to teach, at least in terms of our curriculum. And people who taught here in the 90s, the early 2000s, and probably, years back then, I don't know how much this conversation of curriculum review existed at that point. So now we have this idea of courses have expired. If your course has not yet been approved by the National Council, you cannot advertise it. And as I speak, a number of courses within our school haven't been advertised because we submitted the review to that council in November 2023, and to date, they haven't given us feedback. So staff who are employed to teach are here. Now they're left with the students in one year. So once those ones complete, I don't know what will happen to staff. So for me, what I would want, what I would be interested in at this point is, so before this Council for Higher Education came in with its demands, and even before the Council for Curriculum Development also came to dictate the sort of influence and shape the curriculum, what was the situation like? Because now we are told, and this is something which was even raised here in Senate, that university staff and whatever we are teaching, we should align ourselves to the competence-based curriculum. So in other words, what is going on down there should dictate what we do, should dictate what the university does. And so I like that you're sort of like turning this upside down and saying that it should be the other way. So I'm just curious from maybe your readings everywhere else, what really who really shapes and influences this? I know there's a lot of sometimes resistance. I know my colleagues in College of Health Sciences, but at the end they are told, well, until you do what they want, they will not approve your curriculum, and so you can't teach those courses. And so because of that, the College of Health Sciences is really affected. And they'll say that there's a way that their courses, programs relate to one another. So if you don't advertise one, then you also affect the other one, and it affects the other one like that. So I don't know where we're headed. But then lastly, so I like that you're speaking to Makerere University, and I agree with most of the issues that you raise here. But perhaps my concern is just that if Makerere listens to what you're doing, who is going to talk to the state? Because there is also the state in this. It's not just Makerere University, and I think perhaps that is something that we also want to think about. So again, if we look at our history and what the different heads of state have done and sort of kept hold of what is at Makerere whole, I don't know going forward. Who will tell them and how will they even agree that it's okay and even safe for them not to have their presence in Makerere as it is now? Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you very much. Jude said that we should be moving towards more autonomy, and he introduced a number of political issues present. But I think simply what I'm saying, Jude, here is that, and I think Yahya brought it, that these two sides needed
Guys, the audio is off.
So, just as the parable I brought of the bees, right? The bees are part of the farm, but at the same time, they're independent. They act on their own, but they help the farm. And here it is, the university is part of the state. And the state has a lot of influence on the bees. But you cannot, as a farmer, get into the beehive and tell the bees what to do. You have to leave them to do what they do. So I don't want Peter. What makes a public university? If you can you go to page 2 of my paper? At the last section, they're given different models of universities. A public university in Uganda is the one which is part of the government, right? It's controlled by the government, like Makerere. That's all. That's the simplest way I can go, and I don't think to want to go to that. Now, if I go to Yusuf Kasumba, you said that there are various models of universities, but the point you make most or you dwell on is what I'm going to look at. Curriculum. Who should set university curriculum? Universities or an administration body like the National Curriculum Center? How can the National Curriculum Center set your curriculum when your role as a university and your major role is to research and create knowledge? You are the people creating knowledge, right? And somebody tells you the knowledge you are going to deliver. And in most cases, when we sat examinations in the past, we sat for Cambridge University, Cambridge University certificate, high school certificate, university said. So there is something going wrong here in the relationship, in the way knowledge is managed in Uganda. The universities are creators of knowledge. They are the sites where knowledge is created, stored, disseminated. So if the Makerere and the other universities are not willing to fight back when their role is being undermined, that's the problem of your academics. You cannot be told what to teach or to align your teaching to people who have no knowledge. Huh? You are the people who have knowledge. So how can you do that? But you have not said anything. The role of the school is to deliver already known knowledge to students. Your role is not that. Your role is to create knowledge, to organize knowledge, to disseminate it and give it. And then somebody to whom you are supposed to deliver it tells you, no, deliver it according to what I know. They know nothing. Right? So I think that's Kasumba. I think I've answered your question. Yes. It's because you guys are lazy. You are not fighting. Okay. Pamela, I wanted to say the National Council for Higher Education does not control the curriculum of universities. No, the reason this was brought was that there were so many universities getting up that their role is not to approve, to tell you what to teach. Their role is to look at you, at the curriculum, I mean the lessons you've made, and to determine whether they are up to the standard of universities. That's their role. And let me tell you, a lot of a number of programs which were brought to me for the 10 years I was there for teaching at the time from Makerere was substandard. I do remember kicking back some 100 programs almost every year back to Makerere. And now, I normally had assessors from various universities, University of Ghana, Ethiopian University, even from University of London, and we sat together. I say, is this university staff? And it wasn't. But the majority of programs, particularly in the health sciences, were up to standard. But in the arts and social sciences, we had problems. But we don't, National Council does not set curriculum at all. But it has the power to refuse, to say, no, what you have said is not good. Go back. Yeah. We had a bit yeah. Why we yeah. That was to harmonize
University curriculums across. How far did that go?
I think that was a very wrong decision because a university, each university is an individual, and it has its own. Some, for example, if you go to the US, you find some are started by Presbyterians, some are started by Muslims, some are started by Jesuits, some by Jews. You cannot say they should have the same curriculums like schools. Schools do that, maybe, but even schools in those days don't have, because there it's university entrances that determine the curriculum of schools, right? But here, I have not had the universities say to the minister, no, we are not going to align our curriculum to schools to who teach in the knowledge we create. Nobody. Right? But to go back at what I'm saying, yes, Makerere should remain a government university funded by the government, but Makerere should not be administered as a government parastatal body. That's what I'm saying.
Before we get to Dr. Luerekera, there is somebody who made a comment in the chat some time back. And this is what he says. A very fascinating paper and presentation. I like the beehive analogy in which Professor Kasozi argues that the state should provide resources and security while granting universities full autonomy over academic processes. 3 questions for Prof. What specific political condition is or stakeholder coalition is would be necessary to negotiate the transition from parastatal status to a chartered public university? That's question 1. To negotiate the transition from parastatal status to a chartered public university. And question 2 from the same person. To what extent can we attribute the success of the 1950s and 60s to governance autonomy? To governance autonomy in relation to factors such as colonial era resource investments, smaller student populations, or the Pan-African intellectual ferment of the independence era. And lastly, in a context where philanthropy is underdeveloped and the state capacity for tax administration is weak, how realistic are these alternative revenue streams? And then, okay.
Okay, go ahead.
And then there is another question here. On what basis are the universities told what to teach?
What basis?
Are the universities told what to teach? So meanwhile here, we have two hands so far. We have Dr. Bernard and Dr. Sekito.
I have those and then answer. Okay. But anyway, this is not a seminar. We discuss. It's not a question of answering them. Okay, next.
Thank you very much, Chair of this session. And my name is Makerere Bernard. Thank you, Prof, for this exciting conversation. And I think I'm so glad that I've had the opportunity to meet you in life. I've met you a lot of times through your writing. And this is a great day for me. I like particularly your insights on matters that I consider to be dear to me, that relate to the university having its core role as the production of knowledge. And someone of your caliber addressing this issue, I think is really pertinent, because you come from a side of knowledge. You heralded and you are the steward of regulation of university education for that many years, when you took charge of the National Council for Higher Education, and in fact, because you oversaw its inception. I've listened attentively to what you are saying. And this year alone, I want to share an experience. This year, I submitted 4 abstracts to attend 4 conferences in different places. And all my abstracts were successful, but I was not able to attend any of those conferences. And I remember for one of them, I approached my principal and whispered to her. I said, I would like to go to attend, I really wanted to attend this particular conference. Is there a way that the college can be of help? And she told me, well, actually that is no longer funded. So I didn't attend any. And lately, I think this university has been talking about leveraging the side of knowledge education as promoted through research. So that was a bit disturbing to me, how we can actually produce knowledge without having funding for conference participation. And I think your presentation attempts now to clarify a part of the puzzle which that created. Because that, I think, is the policy as of now for government entities, because attending forums such as that is no longer a priority for the government funding. And because maybe that is true for other government-supported entities, so it is true also for Makerere. So I already have a challenge about that, because I don't see how we can talk about emphasizing that knowledge production at the level of research when we cannot have participation and attending conferences as a financing priority. So I would be very glad to see what thoughts you have about that. But also, I want to relate that to something else, again, that puzzles me. Whereas we talk a lot about shifting to graduate research. In reality, and in conformity with what you have been discussing here, well, I don't know whether we are still at the point of transition or whether it's really a priority. I see that we are still doing a lot of undergraduate teaching. So basically, our knowledge production at this rate is still heavily that which is based in the class. And the measure, the most outstanding measure of that knowledge production is in terms of going in class to teach, administer exams, and present results in a very short time. So we have just completed exams, I think at the beginning of this month, and I've been told that already deadlines have been set of turning in marks, because that is the knowledge you produce, is in the form of marks. You know, again, I see a very serious conflict here, but that is notwithstanding the real amount of work that should go into turning in those marks. Okay, because you're talking about a class that is of a certain number. I don't know what was your experience, Professor, when you were here, but one of the classes I have is up to like 270 something. Okay, so that is my environment in which I have to produce the knowledge. Okay, that is the kind of interaction that I have to make. but some have even worse experiences than that. Okay, and then also I want to tie that to another interesting component, again, that relates to what you're talking about, because all this does not factor into the conception, or perhaps I don't understand it myself, the conception of workload, the workload issues that are associated vis-a-vis the knowledge production. Because this university has adopted exactly the same system, or I stand to be advised, I think it has adopted exactly the same system of measuring work in terms of clocking in and clocking out. Okay, so the actual work time that is recognized complies exactly with what all the other government institutions do. And my question to you would be, in your opinion, how you think that relates to the factor of knowledge production. Would that mean that actually my contribution towards knowledge production is tied to the number of hours that I'm considered to be here? How does that relate really in the end? So you have that whole paradox of things there, but also you have the disconnect, in my opinion, between what is considered to be the ideal of the university as looking towards emphasizing knowledge production, but the inputs that are related here are not really matching. And as you envisage the 100 years, which 100 years actually are beginning today, or they began the day after we celebrated 100 years, what projections do you want to make in light of that? And especially when you want to tie that to probably the dynamics that shape these kinds of debates where we are not, so that eventually we want to conform to certain perspectives that relate to the financing component. Because I think at the end of the day, somebody is trying to navigate issues of money, and because that money is coming from a certain source, and that source actually has got a policy that relates to this and that and that, and therefore it has to fit into this environment, probably to force it to fit the way it fits elsewhere. So I'll be very interesting to hear your views on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Zaid. Thank you, Prof, for that fascinating paper. I have 3, if not 4 questions. One, that why are you making a 100-year projection? Why didn't you write about Makerere maybe in the next 90 years when you are still in the executive office in the National Council for Education? What is so special with 100 years? Number 2, 2016 you wrote National Council for Education and its role in the growth of university subsector in Uganda. Aware of the fact that like Makerere, which is not independent, even the National Council for Education is not independent. Is this a feasible role in your 100-year projection? 3, 2003, your work on university education in Uganda, the state of university education in Uganda, challenges and opportunities. If you were to rework that, what would you add? What would you remove? Because it's not clear what the opportunities are. It's on the basis of these opportunities that maybe we can envisage the 100-year ahead of us. I submit.
Professor, let me use this opportunity because I'm moving around the microphone. My name is Christopher Muhozi. Now, Christopher Muhozi. Now, yes, Christopher. Now, mine is, I don't know whether to call it a music. Musing, but so when I was an undergraduate here, around as you move towards University Hall, there are many parts, and they are gone. And nowadays, there are many marabou stocks, karori, around the campus. And if you are, you don't even have to be a keen observer. You'll see many dogs around social sciences parking there. You've seen the dogs. I'm wondering what we will have in the next 100 years. Thank you.
So, Prof, do you wish to
Yes.
respond? Then we proceed with.
Yes.
Thank you.
The person who online said, what are the political and the conditions that were needed to transition to chartered universities? Now, he should just look at Tanzania, 204 to 206. They set up a commission in which surveyed the universities, and they chartered their university. Obviously, many African countries are retrogressing, and as Yahya said, the relationship between the university, the knowledge site, and the state site is not a very comfortable one. So, although they got a lot of freedom in Tanzania, it is being chipped away, but they are still chartered, all right? And in Kenya, they are still chartered. There is the Universities Act of 205 in Tanzania, and the Universities Act of 2012 in Kenya. In Uganda, we've never done that. And what is meant by a chartered university? It remains a government university. The government remains the major funder, but the university is freer from the state and is guaranteed. And these charters were given as long as the universities started in the 12th century in the West. And so they are not independent. So all it needs is political will on the state. First of all, it's the universities themselves to define what they want to be, what their relationship with the state should be. Nobody is going to come from Entebbe and tell you, I want you to be like this. No, you have to do it yourself. So you have to say that. And the second question he asked, what were the conditions which propelled Makerere to shine in the 50s and 60s? I would refer this person to Carol Shishaman's book, Makerere. becoming an African university. Right. I refer to that because Makerere went a lot of struggle before that. One principal, Lamont, had to resign after struggling with the governor of Kenya, and Dipansen was about to resign after struggling with the governor of Tanzania about Makerere's freedom. But he succeeded. Nyerere and Mboya were allowed to speak here because the governor wanted to take charge of that. So from that time on, the colonial government really left the university very free. And there was a university grants committee. The government gave universities money, but never directly, so that the university's budget is not affected by the emptiness of the national budget. When there is and that's what happened to us during the Amini period. When there is no money in the government, the university has no money. When you have a medium body to which the government gives money, and then that money is passed through to the state, to the universities, you have a situation where the two budgets of the state and of the university are independent of each other, and neither of them controls the other. And when the state is in direct constraints, the university is not affected. So the philosophy, my paper is not to cut government funding. It is rather to reduce the control. So on what basis are universities told what to teach? They are not told what to teach. They decide what to teach. Those are the questions he answered. I hope he's hearing. Okay, Mr. Luereka. I'm sorry you couldn't attend conferences. I'm sorry there was no money. But look, there is a structure problem, mainly analyzed by Yahya, but on me, I focused on the governance problem we have, in the situation we have. What he's saying, he needs a revolution. I don't know when we can do that. So I'm very sorry, but that's the case. What is happening is that the structure of the model of governance does not allow Makerere to have money supply for you to go. I don't have anything to add. Zaid, you asked me why 100 projections. Why? I don't know. Why did Makerere celebrate the 100 years? Do you have any reason? Well, 100 years are taken as a century in which to measure what you have achieved in order to project on what you are going to do. Right? And that's why I selected. And we have published a book, very service, the last 100 years. And my thinking, and I think Yahya should participate, is that we should think very seriously on what type of university does this state need, and to what extent will the university influence the structure of the state, while at the same time the state structures the university. These are questions that I didn't go to, and I don't have an apology because my aim was to focus on that. And as I repeat in the paper, the National Council for Higher Education was founded for two, I think, reasons. First, that was the new neoliberal period where the World Bank was forcing states, African states which were bankrupt, to unbundle the state, to remove as much responsibility to the state as possible. But at the same time, it was at the same time that there were many enrollments in the school system. And so universities were started. And I was very clear when I started the National Council for Education that our role is to guarantee quality. Each university must go back and design what they teach according to their philosophy. The philosophy that according to their desires. The Islamic University has its completely different philosophy from Uganda matters. Design your papers. We look at them. We see if they match university standard, which we thought means based on originality rather than copying from schools. You see, the education system works that the universities produce the knowledge, the schools disseminate reduce the knowledge. But to tell me that the professors have agreed that the National Curriculum Center should design their curriculum in universities is really crazy. And I'm very surprised that you people have not protested. You have not protested. How can that be? Yeah. But even the minister should not do that. That's killing initiative. I don't think I can manage more than 3 questions because I'm sick.
Prof is tired and
I'm not feeling well.
yes, it's understandable. Chair, do you have anything to say?
Prof, on behalf of all of us, on behalf of all our young scholars, we really thank you. Everybody boasted about Professor. I didn't tell people, but Professor was also my external examiner for my PhD. And perhaps if he had said no, I wouldn't have a PhD today, but I'm very proud of him. Professor, thank you very much. You've given us a lot of homework to think about.
Yeah.
And I just think that before you finalize, there are a couple of things you may want to check out again in the write-up. Especially, I like the last so many recommendations of philanthropy, and a lot is being done here. We have a gender mainstreaming department, which is giving scholarships. That's university. We have MasterCard, and they actually now go and verify. You don't just say I'm poor. They go and verify.
Yes.
And they are supporting a whole lot of students. So thank you very much, colleagues. I think we can continue to engage Prof on email. There are so many things in this paper. Maybe one thing I must admit that I think sometimes we are also cowards. When the state says certain things, we keep our lane clear for fear of for fear of being ostracized. So thank you very much for your time. And we really wish you well, a quick recovery, and look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much. And I'm I'm very glad. You are a true representative of the University of Cape Town. Yeah, it's Cape Town that way. That's where she did her PhD. Thank you.
Thank you. So to really thank Professor for challenging us, because you can see Professor at his age, he's been a prolific scholar. He's produced and continues producing. So we want to try to emulate him. I'm saying try because there are so many things. I mean, and his paper speaks to most of the things. You talk about a research-led university, but also you have a very high undergraduate teaching load. So how do you negotiate between teaching and marking 700 scripts, and you need to look for funding so that you can do research to be able to contribute to knowledge production? It's just, it's twists and twists, all that. So Professor, we're really grateful. We're very inspired and we enjoy your work and we look forward to this piece. I wasn't there at the beginning, I'm sorry, because I was held up in another meeting. So I don't know if it's going to come out as a paper or it's a chapter or it's part of a whole book. You know, Professor can surprise you anytime. Anytime. So, Professor, thank you very much. And I join my colleague to wish you a quick recovery. Be well.
Protocol-wise, I think once the dean speaks, I don't think anybody else can speak. Thank you. Thank you so much. Prof, thank you so much for your time. And thank you for the fascinating presentations. Colleagues online, thank you so much for showing up. We are sorry for what has not gone on well, but we appreciate your presence and your comments. God bless you all.
Thank you. Bye.